Stream for free right now on ITVX.
And now with a look at what stories are making the headlines this Friday night, it's the ITV News at 10.
After days of haggling, the UN finally votes on the conflict in Gaza, but falls far short of calling for a ceasefire in the conflict. To some, tonight's vote will give hope that aid will finally flow. To others, it is a toothless resolution that will simply prolong the suffering.
Today, this council provided a glimmer of hope amongst a sea of unimaginable suffering.
Instead of this, they have resorted to their favoured tactic of gross pressure, blackmail and twisting arms so that at the last minute they'll be able to present the members of the council with an ultimatum.
Dan has been following the negotiations at the UN all week and will guide us through what, if anything, it means. Also tonight, the chilling details on the mass shooting in Prague, the worst such incident in the Czech Republic's history.
Policemen looking at us, pointing at us with guns, shouting at us that we should have their hands up. And then we heard 2 more shots and we were still running, shouting at people to just turn backwards.
Inflation may be down, but the dreaded R-word, recession, is on the lips of forecasters. How much of a worry is that for the government? Oh, empty town of Bethlehem, how the conflict in Gaza means one of the quietest Christmases in the birthplace of Jesus. And
he's chosen double 10. He's hit double 10.
Hotshot Luke the Nuke Littler tells us how the crowd helped him lift him to success.
The crowd at the Alexandra Palace, they're just always chanting. They never stop. They just come up with a chant. Once that's done, they just start with the next chant.
This is ITV News at 10 with Rageh Omaar.
Good evening. After days of delay, diplomacy and high-level negotiations at the UN, for some there is a sense tonight of, is that it? Yes, the UN Security Council has passed a legally binding resolution calling for the delivery of desperately needed aid to Gaza to be speeded up. But the end product is drastically watered down from the original proposals. The word toothless was mentioned by Russia in evaluating the resolution. Indeed, there is no call for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The United States would never have given that its blessing. Instead, it says conditions for a cessation of hostilities should be created. At the UN, such words matter, but on the ground in Gaza, action speaks so much louder. Today may have marked something of a step forward, but starving and dying Palestinians need so much more.
For 77 days, the war in Gaza has raged, and the international community has appeared powerless to act. The death toll has surpassed 20,000 and climbs higher every day. Today, though, the United Nations Security Council finally agreed on a resolution. After days of delays, vetoes and wrangling, the moment had arrived, even though the bitter finger-pointing continued.
I will never understand why some council members have remained silent in the face of such evil.
America-angry Hamas wasn't even mentioned, and Russia furious at US efforts to water down the text.
Instead of this, they have resorted to their favoured tactic of gross pressure, blackmail and twisting arms.
Finally, the vote.
Those in favour of the draft resolution, please raise their hand.
For a second, it appeared the United States was backing the resolution until the ambassador was gently reminded America was abstaining.
Abstentions?
It left Russia and the US awkward bedfellows, both fence-sitting for very different reasons.
We know this is not a perfect text. We know only a ceasefire will end this suffering. Often, In diplomacy, the challenge is meeting the moment in the world we live in, not in the world that we want.
The original draft called for a sustainable cessation of hostilities, whereas today's resolution is vaguer, only calling for the conditions for such a cessation. An earlier draft demanded the use of all land, sea and air routes for aid. That was changed to all available routes, which could maintain Israeli control. And rather than the UN being allowed to exclusively monitor aid, today's resolution instead appoints a coordinator to help monitor deliveries.
Today, we supported this resolution, which will streamline aid checks so we can massively scale up the humanitarian response.
Today, this Council provided a glimmer of hope amongst a sea of unimaginable suffering.
What's not clear is whether Israel will fully cooperate with this new plan to increase the number of lorries getting into Gaza. Despite the compromises and bad blood, there was clear relief at the UN and even a tepid handshake between foes. Days before Christmas, this almost felt like goodwill to all mankind. The acid test, though, will be whether this resolution makes any difference to the plight of people in Gaza.
And Dan is in Washington. Dan, you and I have been speaking about this delayed vote since Monday. It is symbolic tonight, but after so many changes, is there any chance that this brings us any closer to a pause, at least in the fighting in Gaza?
Well, Rageh, I don't think the signs are particularly good. I mean, the Israeli ambassador to the UN tonight was very critical of the United Nations, saying it couldn't be trusted to monitor aid because, as he said, for 17 years it's allowed Hamas to dig tunnels and build missiles. And on the other hand, Hamas has put out a statement saying this resolution is an empty step and has been incredibly critical of the US handling of all this, saying it has robbed the essence of this resolution. So pretty bad mood from both sides there. The UN itself is saying it will be actively seized, as they put it in this resolution, of the Gazan situation, and they're expecting a report from this new coordinator within 20 days. But I think the reality on the ground is it's going to come down to Israel and Hamas, of course, and at the moment Hamas is saying it's not going to release any more hostages until Israel stops the war, and Israel, on the other hand, is saying, look, it's going to continue prosecuting this campaign until it has destroyed Hamas's leadership and rescued as many hostages as possible.
All right, Dan, one to watch. Thank you so much indeed. In Prague today, they have been lighting candles rather than Christmas lights as Czechs mourn the 14 people killed in yesterday's mass shooting. As they do, questions are being asked of the police, who now believe the gunman was also behind a double murder last week. Questions, too, about what drove a 24-year-old with no criminal record or discernible link to extremism to kill his father and use a stash of legally owned weapons to bring such terror to his former university and its students.
These are the final frantic minutes of a manhunt for a mass murderer. These corridors are lined with classrooms that had been full of students learning when an armed man walked in and started shooting. On a ledge outside, terrified students clung to what they must have seen as relative safety, as hundreds of others escaped into the square outside, including 3 who told me they were in a lesson on the 3rd floor when they were instructed to run.
On each floor we could see like 12 policemen looking at us, pointing at us with guns, shouting at us that we should have their hands up. And then we heard 2 more shots even from there, and we were still running, shouting at people to just turn backwards and running from the buildings.
The man on the roof, named locally as David Kozak, had started shooting onto the street below. When police finally confronted him there, he shot himself. In the classrooms below, emergency workers tried desperately to help the injured and began to try and identify the dead. Among them was Dr. Lanka Hlavkova, director of the university's Institute of Musicology. Her killer, David Kozak, was a student here. He was also the legal owner of several guns. Police say he started killing before he reached the university. Inside his house in the village of Hustonia, they found a dead man they believed to be his father, before receiving a tip-off that he was on his way to Charles University in Prague. They evacuated one building where he'd been due to attend a lecture, but half an hour later, the shooting started at another university building nearby. It was just after 3:10 when police surrounded him on its roof. This square has become a shrine today. Many of those coming to bring flowers or light candles are students here themselves.
I go here every other day, so when I heard the news yesterday, it felt terrible. I was really shocked.
And that is a word reverberating through this city's soul tonight. As well as the shock and the sadness, there's been a sense of anger amongst students I've spoken to here today. This country has some of the most relaxed gun laws in Europe. People have been coming here to reflect and remember, but also to make a stand. Tomorrow will be a national day of mourning, as this square fills with candles, not to celebrate Christmas, but to remember the dead. Chloe Keedy, News at 10, Prague.
Here, the Prime Minister has created something of a catch-22 for himself when it comes to 2 of his 5 pledges. Inflation has been halved, but the high interest rates credited for achieving that goal appear to have dented Rishi Sunak's hopes of growing the economy to such an extent that the R word, recession, was on the lips of politicians and economists today. Revised figures show the economy actually shrank between July and September, meaning the picture is worse than previously thought.
Business was brisk at this Cardiff butcher's today. Retailers have been defying the economic gloom, but their costs are still high.
The increase we have in electric, there's no way can I put that onto steaks. Pork chops would be the most expensive things on the planet.
And customers are counting their pennies.
Going normal shopping is hard. We just got to cut back on a lot of things, to be honest.
Right back. Yeah, it's too expensive now.
You always want to sort of splash out a little bit at Christmas, but yeah, I have definitely cut that back this year.
We know the economy's been pretty flat, but the Office for National Statistics has updated its estimates for the middle 6 months of the year. Today's revised figures show that in April to June, when the economy was thought to have grown by 0.2%, in fact, it didn't grow at all. And in July to September, when it was thought to have flatlined, it actually shrank by 0.1%. Now, if it shrinks again in this fourth quarter that we're in now, the UK will technically be in a recession, albeit one which is so mild that it wasn't initially spotted.
So you've got 2 in the front.
This could put anyone who has staked their political future, say, on growing the economy in a difficult position.
What happened to your pledge to grow the economy?
Well, compared to the predictions at the beginning of the year, the economy has done better, and we've actually grown faster than our European neighbours like Germany, for example. But of course we want to see more growth.
It will be February before we know whether growth returned at the end of this year, but the opposition are reacting now anyway.
This is yet more evidence of failure from Rishi Sunak. He's already failed to cut waiting lists, he's failed to stop the boats, and now it's been confirmed that he's failed to grow the economy too.
But there are reasons for cheer. Retail sales were stronger than expected in November.
So there's a sort of a heritage around knitwear which we really love.
And at Finisterre, selling sustainable gear to outdoor types, it's been good all year.
We had a pretty wet summer and a comparatively colder autumn versus last year, and bad weather generally means good conditions for us from a trading perspective, so we've had a good year.
And lower than expected inflation in November has raised festive hopes that the Bank of England might be able to start cutting interest rates sooner than expected.
And Carl joins me now. Carl, we're at the end of the year, end of year term card, I suppose, for the Prime Minister. Not great news in terms of facing an election year.
No, could do better, I think you would have to say. Look, he has achieved his first pledge, halve inflation, or at least that has been achieved, whether or not you think that's got much to do with him. But this is the second one, growing the economy. Now, the fine print on this says that it should grow between Q3 of this year, when we now know that it shrank, and Q4, where we are now. So that one hangs in the balance, frankly, and we'll know in February. But it also makes pledge number 3, which is to reduce the debt as a proportion of GDP, harder. Governments usually do that by growing GDP. So, that's not growing at the minute. It's harder. Again, there is fine print about it falling over a 5-year period, but I think people will judge that at the time of the election. Of course, we know pledge number 4, cut the waiting lists. That is not happening at the minute, partly down to the strikes in the NHS. And pledge number 5, stop the boats. Well, they have certainly reduced, but they certainly have not stopped. So he still has quite a lot of work to do. Now, he could achieve more than one of these, very well could achieve that, but it will take a bit of time. And that's why so many people around Westminster think the election is much more likely to happen in the autumn than in the spring.
OK. Carl, thank you very much indeed. And at a time when people are counting every penny, news that rail fares in England will go up by 4.9% next year is particularly unwelcome for commuters. Unions called it a slap in the face for passengers, but the government said its intervention meant the increase wasn't as larger and won't come into effect until March. On Wednesday, the Scottish Government announced fares that will rise by 8.7% from April. A decision is yet to be made on fares in Wales. After quietly rowing back on plans to raise the earnings threshold for people to bring family members to the UK, Rishi Sunak attempted to bring some clarity to the issue today. It was originally announced by Home Secretary James Cleverly that threshold for family visas would rise from £18,600 to £38,700 in the spring in a bid to cut net migration. Cue criticism over the disruption that would cause. So yesterday, the Home Office said it would increase to £29,000 in the spring and didn't set a date for it to go up further. Cue anger from hardline Tory MPs. Today, the Prime Minister insisted the minimum salary requirements would still rise to £38,700, but not until 2025. Now, little by little, we are learning more about what happened to Alex Batty in the 6 years he was missing. The latest details come from the 17-year-old himself, who has given an interview to the Sun newspaper. In it, he spoke about his relationship with his mother during their years abroad and his reasons for finally leaving her to come back to the UK. But Greater Manchester Police want to know more and today launched a criminal investigation into Alex's suspected abduction.
Being back with my grandma feels quite surreal.
6 years ago, when Alex was 11, his mother and grandfather took him on what he thought was a holiday to Spain, but it became an extended alternative lifestyle. They led a nomadic existence in first Morocco and then France. This was one of the places they stayed. By the time he was 14, Alex says he was working in construction, painting and renovating to earn money to eat. Alex told The Sun that he began to have doubts.
I started weighing up the pros and the cons from each lifestyle. And after a couple of months of contemplation, I realised England was definitely the way forward.
His grandmother is his legal guardian until he turns 18. So earlier this month, he began making plans to run away, to return to her home in Greater Manchester.
What do I need to pack? Don't show any sort of indication that I'm leaving, and my thought was to write a note. So I wrote a note to my mum, told her how much I loved her, how much I appreciated what she had done for me. I didn't want her to worry about me, I didn't want her to worry about herself, and saying goodbye, really.
He was picked up by a van driver on this road in the early hours of the morning. He initially claimed he'd been walking for 4 days, but now says he exaggerated the distance so the police would find it harder to go back and find his mother. A story that his grandfather had died recently was also untrue. Even though he lost much of his childhood, Alex says he understands their decision to take him abroad. He said his mother was a great person, but not a great mum.
They thought about the present, they didn't think about the future. Okay, yeah, I was safe and I was always healthy, but no social life, no meeting people my own age, kind of always being isolated.
The teenager has been interviewed by Greater Manchester Police, who today confirmed they've launched a criminal investigation into alleged child abduction. Ian Woods, News at 10.
Still to come on the programme, in the town where the story of Christmas began, we see how the celebrations are being scaled back this year. And the 16-year-old who has already taken darts by storm and is now aiming for the very top. All that and more after the break.
However these 7 symptoms of heartburn and indigestion feel like to you, all 7 symptoms are caused by stomach acid. So Gaviscon Double Action acts in the stomach to neutralise acid fast and forms a raft to prevent contents from going back up the food pipe for long-lasting relief. For 7 symptoms, think Gaviscon.
Does it take you longer to prepare to relax than the actual relaxing?
Make it easy to get things just right. Try Airwick's Essential Mist.
Perfectly portable and infused with natural essential oils to fill your moment with amazing fragrance for up to 45 days.
Now that's a breath of fresh Airwick.
And now try our spiced apple and cinnamon fragrance to give your home that festive feeling.
Lefroy. Hello.
Oh, so relaxing.
This Christmas, there's more to Argos.
Tough stains can be a nightmare, and detergent alone isn't always enough. So bring on Vanish to help lift those stains. The UK's #1 stain remover. Just add 1 scoop in every wash. Even at 20 degrees, our Oxy-Action formula lifts away the toughest stains, helping to keep your colours brighter for longer. Save your clothes and save more than 50% on your energy bills. Clothes live longer with Vanish.
It's the winter sale at SCS, with triple discounts online now and in-store 10 a.m. Boxing Day. SCS, helping create the home you love.
Make Christmas 2024 a walk in the park with Park Christmas savings. Just choose an amount to put away regularly and start spreading the cost now. Visit getpark.co.uk.
You work hard to keep your mouth healthy. But wait, does your toothpaste work just as hard? All toothpastes clean, but Oral-B Densify goes beyond clean. Over time, most people can experience enamel loss. Oral-B works harder to prevent future enamel density loss, to strengthen and extend the life of teeth. Go beyond clean with the toothpaste brand dentists use themselves, Oral-B Densify. And now new Oral-B Densify Decay Control with clinically proven ingredients.
Look at you, now look at me. Look at you, now look at me. Look at you, now look at me. How you like that? You gonna like that?
The only phone with best tape. Google Pixel 8.
Welcome back. As people around the world prepare to celebrate Christmas in the little town where the story was born, there are a few reasons for cheer. Bethlehem in the occupied West Bank would usually be packed with tourists and glad tidings, but the absence of visitors because of Israel's war with Hamas is costing the economy millions, and tied, as many residents are, by faith and by blood to the people of Gaza, festivities have been scaled back. So this Christmas, the prayers for peace and goodwill are stronger than ever.
At a church in the town where Christmas began, in Bethlehem, where the faithful believe Mary came to deliver her newborn, A baby lies not in a manger, but in rubble. Gaza is just 50 miles from here, and there are still bodies in its ruins. Thousands of children amongst its dead.
This year, Christmas feels different. This year, we're not celebrating in the usual way, for it is impossible to celebrate Christmas when there is a genocide taking place in our land. It is impossible to celebrate when our children are being killed and massacred in Gaza.
For 2,000 years, this place in the West Bank has drawn pilgrims from all over the world to worship alongside its Greek Orthodox, Armenian and Catholic communities. But not this year. Now it's just Bethlehem's own faithful, and they're exhausted by worry for their families and neighbours in Gaza. Their prayers and the war extends to this town too. 900 of its people are now detained in Israeli jails. 7 killed here since the conflict began. I am holding on to my faith, they sing, but it's not easy. This time last year, Bethlehem was flooded with tourists. Now even locals struggle to get in or out. The Israeli checkpoints, which always limit their movements, closed off for good, emptying streets and crippling the local economy. They're still making traditional decorations, but there's no one to buy them.
Bethlehem is totally besieged and blockaded. All entrances are closed. The people are left without work. According to the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, we have $120 million lost every day.
So many people right across the Holy Land crying out to the heavens. But as festivities begin across much of the world, in the town where its story began, Christmas has been cancelled. Rachel Younger, News at 10.
Back home, and when it comes to the work of the men and women chosen to protect us, the police, there are some basic responsibilities we expect them to perform. Tasks like investigating crimes and protecting the vulnerable. Inspectors have now raised serious concerns, though, about just how that is being done at England's second largest force, West Midlands Police. Previously placed in special measures, it's been found inadequate in 3 key areas.
It would take one police officer to do something and they both would be alive today.
Noor Norris's family were failed by West Midlands Police with catastrophic consequences. Her sister, Kaula Salim, and her niece, Raneem Uday, were murdered by Raneem's abusive ex-partner. Despite at least 7 calls to police, an inquest found officers failed to investigate him and protect his victims. 5 years on, inspectors have found similar shortcomings.
To see that much failure today, it doesn't surprise me, and it really worries me and upsets me, and we all feel vulnerable and unprotected. There's no safeguarding for any of us, especially women and girls.
The police inspectorate found England's second biggest force is failing in some of its most fundamental duties. It rated West Midlands Police inadequate in 3 out of 8 areas: investigating crime, protecting vulnerable people and managing offenders, and that it requires improvement in 3 other areas, including how it responds to the public.
Offenders aren't being brought to justice, and victims are not getting the justice they deserve.
It's led to the force being placed in special measures and being supervised more closely.
The force's chief constable, who started a year ago, has said he totally disagrees with that decision, that the findings of the inspection don't reflect a new operating model brought in earlier this year and the improvements the force has made since.
But in one of the country's most diverse regions, there are concerns too that its use of force is disproportionately high among black people. Desmond Jadu has set up forums between communities and the police, but says there's a lack of trust.
Residents have actually seen 2 people fighting in the street with knives. They've actually called the police and there hasn't been a police response. People now don't want to report anything, or they don't rather see the point in reporting anything, because as far as they're concerned, nothing's done.
Inspectors recognised improvements are being made, but among the nearly 3 million people it serves, restoring confidence in their police force won't be easy. Ben Chapman, News at 10, Birmingham.
Now, after weeks of speculation, the race to be Christmas #1 is over, and an old, and I mean old, favourite came out on top. Even I can remember that. And finally, while most 16-year-olds might spend a few hours sat on the sofa after Christmas dinner, Luke Littler will have other things on his mind this year, having sensationally made it through to the third round of the World's Darts Championship last night. He's got a few days to prepare and will doubtless spend some time throwing arrows in between the turkey and the presents. Today, he told us he doesn't feel under pressure stepping up onto the stage at Ali Pali, and is backing himself to go all the way.
For a place in the last 32 of the World Darts Championship.
He's chosen double 10. He's hit double 10.
He had already created shockwaves in the World Darts Championship as the youngest player to ever win a match. And last night, 16-year-old Luke the Nuke Littler did it again as he won his second round against Andrew Gilding, who's ranked 20th in the world.
He's the darling at the Ali Pali and he's through to the next round.
But the teenager from Warrington is taking it all in his stride.
Unbelievable experience. People wanted me to sign everything. There's no pressure, it's just nerves. But once obviously it takes a good few legs to get settled and get into the right momentum, but once it all clicks for me, then they all start going.
Luke picked up his first dart as a toddler, starting with a magnetic board before graduating to the real thing. By 9, he was playing in pub leagues and beating the adults, and winning seems to come naturally.
I only practice half an hour to an hour a day, and it's going good so far. I've won 3 world titles in the youth system, but obviously if I do need to change things and put more hours in, then I'll happily do it.
Even the chant of "You've got school in the morning"
He's enjoying the chant, he's enjoying the moment.
Didn't put him off his debut match.
The crowd at the Alexandra Palace, they're just always chanting. They never stop. They just come up with a chant. Once that's done, they start with the next chant, and it's all about focusing on that stage.
He celebrated that first round win against Christian Kist with a kebab, but has his sights set much higher.
Hopefully I can go to the very top. That's what people say. You're at such a young age, I'm this good. What am I going to be like in the next 10 to 20 years? It's just I'm going to have to go with the flow.
Luke will return for his third round match after Christmas, hoping to make it a treble and continue his winning streak. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
That's it. Good night. Thanks for watching.
Visibility may be low this evening as the cold weather hits. Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
Hello and a very good evening to you. So overall, the weather story in the run-up to Christmas is looking unsettled, blustery at times, but it will be remaining very mild. That's with the exception of the far north of Scotland. You can see here rain continuing to pile in, could be stirring into sleet and snow as we move through the small hours. And of course, there is the risk of some icy stretches on any untreated surfaces. Now elsewhere, give or take 1 or 2 showers. For most, it will be dry overnight, a lot of cloud around and mild temperatures, not falling below 8 degrees for most of us. And that's how we start things on Saturday morning. So quite cloudy out there first thing, and that rain continues to pile in across the far north. Some of this could be heavy in places too, but for much of England and Wales throughout tomorrow, daylight hours at least, largely dry, give or take the odd shower. A few bits of brightness here and there, and it's remaining quite blustery, but our temperatures above average for the time of year. Once again, we're looking at highs there up to around 11 or 12 degrees. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
Good evening and welcome to a news update from Granada Reports. A criminal investigation has been launched into the alleged abduction of Alex Batty, the 17-year-old from Oldham, who returned to the UK last week after 6 years missing abroad. Alex was in Spain with his mum and granddad at the time, who did not have legal custody. He was found in the south of France last week and returned to the UK at the weekend. He told The Sun his mother was a great person, but not a great mum.
They thought about the present, they didn't think about the future. No social life, no meeting people my own age, kind of always being isolated.
Next, the father left devastated when his innocent daughter, Ellie, was shot dead outside a pub last Christmas Eve. Tim Edwards was still coming to terms with what happened when he had to face the ordeal of a murder trial. But Tim has dealt with his grief by taking a stand against violent crime and helping others in her name. He's been speaking to our reporter, Claire Hannah.
Obviously, it's not a point of celebration for me, Christmas. But I've also got grandkids and other kids, you know, and I feel it's selfish to not want to do something for them.